Hey, folks. Hey. See.
Hey,
Hi. Hey, friend.
hey, sister.
So good to see your face.
It's so good to see yours.
Okay, folks. We got a lot of folks joining in. Give people a second to come on into the room. Um, so, like I said last week, I'm going to be coming to you guys on Fridays at 1 now, every week. So it'll be my little carved out special time for Black food folks proper. And I am so, when one of the people who I really wanted to talk to for this series was Davis Stample. He is an extraordinary person. You all going to get to know him over the next hour, but he has a light about him and a spirit about him that weirdly feels appropriate for today. I mean, I want to start off appropriately and sort of everybody's processing today, however they're processing, but it's nothing but God that made it work out to have David on a program on a day like today. So, um, for those of you all who are unfamiliar, we have the very brilliant David Stample. He's a chef, a really intentional culinary educator, and he calls himself a culinary philanthropist, which I think is a really interesting passion to work from. So, thank you so much, David, for being here. I am so excited for folks to get to know your work.
Thanks for having me.
So, I want to start off kind of at the beginning. I kind of came across you. We were introduced digitally by a mutual friend who was in the midst of this really interesting kind of, I don't know how you would frame the program, but this sort of collective of like-minded folks who were looking at ways to think about their life differently. And she was so impressed by how dynamic you were, and she knew in search of all brown people in food, and connected us. And it was such a, I don't know, it was immediate click that you were special, a special person. But I would love it if you could talk a little bit about really kind of your origin story, right? You had this life in Florida. You came to food in a really unique way. If you could just talk a little bit about that, because I think everybody has a really particular how I came to food story.
Sure. So I was born in Harlem, but I was raised in South Florida. So like Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, and my mother's Jamaican and my father is from North Carolina. So growing up, my mother had a lot of Jamaican, Caribbean food, and my father had a lot of Southern food. We used to go to North Carolina a lot. So growing up, I saw the way that food brought people together. And I realized that every time there's food either cooking or being served or about to be served, there were smiles on people's faces. And I was always wondering, like, how can, I knew I hated school for one. So I said, how can I figure out how to create a life for myself that it seems like fun or is fun for me that's surrounded by food? So, being in my family and seeing how they like dealt with food, I wanted to figure out how to create that for myself. So right out of high school, I decided to do what everyone said I should do, and I went to like not culinary, like a community college. Did some courses, and I'm like, yo, this is going really, really, really slow for me. And in that moment, I realized, yo, I'm hands on. So I went and I checked out a vocational school in Hollywood, Florida. And when I went there, it was like a 9 month program. And I decided, you know what, since it's hands on, I'm going to take every single aspect of this program and I'm going to learn everything. So as soon as there was like opportunities to start volunteering in the community, I started doing that. I realized then that I wanted to like be in food service. So I remember I talked to my chef and I was like, hey, Chef Goodman, can you set it up for me to go to the school to see what it's like to do food service? And he was like, I don't think you're going to like it, but I'll set it up anyways. And I'll never forget, he set up a day for me to go to the culinary school, the elementary school next door. And when I went, it was like heat and serve. And it's like I was seeing the ladies working there and they were just like, yo, let's just heat this up. Let's just serve it. And there was no passion. And I was like, you know what? I know I want to give back seeing this, and I want to not only help the kids, but I also want to help like the people that are cooking. So while I was in school, I volunteered, and I got involved in a lot of like organizations and like different event production companies. But while I was there, I met the executive chef of Coral Ridge Country Club, which is a
Okay.
country club on Fort Lauderdale Beach. And I had just got out of culinary school. I was a part of a culinary organization. They had a barbecue. And my chef from my school was like, David, go to the barbecue. I'm going to be there. I'm going to introduce you, whatever. He introduced me to the chef, Udo, and he ended up giving me a job at the country club. So this is straight out of culinary school. The first food job that I ever actually had was Dunkin' Donuts. And that was during high school. I was working during high school during my junior and senior year. I was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and the manager was so cool, I guess you would say at the time, that I was literally running that place, the drive-through, the inside, by myself at this age, overnight, and I'm the guy making the donuts and the bagels. So I was able to see like that, to kind of like see the food service aspect. But since I was in school, I wasn't able to give it my all, and I didn't necessarily want to. I just wanted to get a taste of it. So now, backtracking to working at the country club, I was there for about 3 years, and they had this thing called a carousel, which was like this outdoor food service thing where the members can come up and they can eat like whenever they want you to sign up a ticket and eat. So I was there for about a year and a half in that particular position, to where it was like I was watching people's kids. They were coming after school and like hanging out with me. The parents were like, hey, my kids are going to come, check them out, take care of them. And then, of course, there were the fun celebrities. So I remember we had these little sandwiches called Little Buddies. And I'll never forget, I was making the Little Buddies, and I had my head down making them. And then I heard this deep voice come around the corner. He was like, yo, let me get some of them little baby things. And I'm like, who is that? And I look up, and it was Scottie Pippen. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it turns out that he was a member there, and he would bring his family. So I would cook for him and Larsa and the family. And I'll never forget, he had a conversation with me one day about just like the realisticness or the realism of the lifestyle that he has in California, and how here in Florida it's a little different, and how he can kind of do his thing, but there everything is so superficial. So I kind of took that conversation as like me being the employee and him being the person that I'm serving, that there's like a line, and knowing like when to draw it and like when it is there. So being at the country club, I was able to realize, hey, I like it here, but I think 3 years is enough. All right. So then after, go ahead.
No.
Okay. So then after that, while I was there for the 3 years, a member came up to me and he was like, hey, I have a home in Canada, and I need a chef to come and cook for me. So being this is my first like real job out of culinary school, and this man's asking me to come to his home in Canada to cook, I'm like, whoa, this is a lot. But I'm like, if he's serious, I'm going to do it. So he went back to Canada, got things situated. He called me. He said, yo, David, we're ready for you to come to Canada. And I was like, all right, well, let me talk to the chef to see if I can get my job when I come back. Chef was like, nah, bruh. If you're going to go to Canada to do that job, you need to just go and take it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take the job. So now realizing that my life was going to be a series of either take it or not. Like either take this opportunity to like feel it out or not. And a lot of times there were opportunities that I didn't necessarily feel like I was ready for. But my uncle Hector always told us luck doesn't exist. Luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. You know, so I went to Canada, and I was there for about a month, and I hated it. You know, I hated it. The lifestyle was a little interesting. It was more than one house. It was 5 different houses on like a peninsula with all these different staff and a lot of different dynamics, whether it was racial or whatever, that was more than I was really ready for at that point in my career. I was just like trying to cook and feed people and be in the community. So I had to reel and come again, girl. And
So,
go ahead.
so, because that's a lot, and I think that there's something. I wanted you to sort of lay it out in your own words, because one of the things I find interested, especially on this platform, right? We talk to folks from all disciplines in the food space, and I think one of the most interesting things is that we really don't know what opportunities are going to mean what to our lives, right? Like there seems to be this thread in your work and in your life about really kind of trying to figure out what your central motivation is for spaces you occupy and taking opportunities as they come, but being prepared, right? So there's a particular pivot, I think it feels like in your work where some of the more, you mentioned the word superficial, which is a big one for me. A lot of times in culinary space, the work is it gets very superficial very quickly, and we get removed from the real function of our jobs, right? Like this notion, this sort of trope about feeding people's souls, and that's true enough. But especially when our aesthetic or our sort of value system is in this very particular sort of fine dining, very particular, particular framework, the spirit and the kind of responsibility part gets lost. And it seems to be this kind of pivot in your work where you began to think really particularly about the function of your culinary life, right? Like the notion of philanthropy and the notion of, but you use the word philanthropy, but I feel like it's really sort of more about social conscience, right? Like this idea about who and what you serve with the talent you have in the space you occupy. So I guess I wonder if you could talk a little bit about where that pivot kind of came, because it's sort of stemmed from working and seeing nonprofit spaces. But just that, I think that's a really interesting, because you have such a juxtaposition from having this career that was, giving you certain signals about your agency, about the spaces that you could occupy, and then also sort of juxtaposing that with sort of seeing a real need.
Well, I guess the best way for me to answer that question is talk about the next job after the country club. Because once I left the country club to go to the personal chef job and I came back and it didn't work out, I was back looking to figure out what my next move was. So in that, I ended up finding a job at a charter school in West Palm Beach. It was really interesting because I had only went to the vocational program and I had only got the education like self-taught from all the things that I learned. So when the school reached out to me, they're like, hey, would you like to be our front of the house instructor part-time? We're just looking for someone to fill in. From that turning into a 3-year stint and me running the kitchen in the culinary program there, I was able to work with at-risk youth and like mentally disabled adults. So in that, I was able to feed them, help them like with the culinary skills. And through that job, my students were able to say and turn to me at sometimes and say, hey, Chef David, what are you still doing here? Like, Chef David, like, thank you so much for teaching us what you taught us. But like, you've been going back and forth doing these festivals and stuff like that. When are you going to do what really fulfills you full time? So the students that I had were between 13 and like 20. So at the time I was like 25, I was super young. So having these young people talk to me about what they see in me when I'm seeing the same thing in them and I'm wanting to help them and lift them up, it was like, wow, I guess I need to figure out how to make a pivot. So all the while I was at the school, I was realizing that my kids were coming to school and there was the only meal they were having was Monday through Friday. So because they were able to make that meal, they knew what went into it and they were like, hey, can I get extra? Can I get this? Can I get that? And in that moment, I was like, yo, what's happening Saturdays and Sundays? You know? So in that job, we tried to figure out different ways to like help the kids, but then realizing that this is a small issue we're having here, but it's really national. And that's when I started working with like organizations like No Kid Hungry to advocate and spread the word. But the more the students talked to me about leaving is the more I was like, you know what, this school, the walls are closing in on me. I was like, you know what, it's time for me to make a move and go to New York. You know, go to New York and really create what culinary philanthropy looks like on a big city scale. You know, and go ahead.
Well, because there's also something really interesting about sort of the South Florida narrative, right? Like, I think there's something in particular about the sort of food festival scene, because I feel like that's a big part of like what you were saying as well. Like a lot of the one of the other things that I'm so impacted by you is also seizing opportunities, right? Like because you start from a place of kindness and because you enter spaces genuinely, when you in spaces with people with resources, with sort of this just this sort of ether around you, where I don't know, your general decency and kindness kind of are infectious. And so, like, I mean, you're talking about being in the midst of this kind of like that kind of food and wine festival sort of circuit, being able to be on the back end of a lot of those kinds of events. I would imagine I mean, there's always a philanthropic um, sort of a charity component to some of those organizations, but being able to see the dichotomy between this very lush, like over the top experience juxtaposed with the service aspect that you're supposed to be purporting. I mean, the coming to New York thing feels like a natural extension of those opportunities kind of pointing you here.
You know, interestingly enough, while I was working at the school, I was coming back and forth doing the New York City Wine and Food Festival every year. So that opportunity actually came about while I was volunteering in culinary school years prior. Like we were volunteering at one of the Food and Wine Festival events for South Beach, and I remember Rachel Ray was walking in, and I was walking out, and I'm always the type to like say something when I see someone that I want to say something to. So I was like, "Yo, Rachel, what's going on? We're volunteering." She was like, "Yo, that's dope. Keep it up." And the gentleman that she was with gave me his card, and we never really shared that much words. But I remember I called him when I got back from Canada, and I was like, "Yo, this is," and he's like, "Oh, I know who this is." And he said, "I have an event coming up in a couple weeks. I want you to see if you're interested and let me know." Granted, me and this gentleman had never worked together before. He only met me that day when he saw me introduce myself to Rachel. I got the email, sister, and the email was like, "Would you like to be the culinary director for Rachel Ray's Burger Bash?" And I said to myself, I've never done anything like it before, but if this gentleman can see something in me, I'm going to go for it.
That's it.
Next thing you know, I'm in New York doing Rachel Ray's Burger Bash, doing all these other events that are surrounding it, doing it for about 4 years. And then there got to be those times where that I would be able to hang out with Rachel. And I'm like, "Yo, I have all these things that I want to accomplish. And I see that you accomplish so many things. Like, what advice can you give me?" And the best piece of advice you gave me was do what you said you're going to do, and everything else will fall into place. And when she
Yeah,
said it to me, it really clicked because it was so simple. A lot of times when we look for advice, we want these complex formulas and we want like this whole in-depth thing. And she was like, "Yo, David, whatever it is you're going to do, just do it. And as you do it, all the help, all the support, everything you're going to need is going to fall into place." And it's like,
and it's not I feel like sometimes we get real comfortable with like the sort of make a way out of no way, you in the right, like this sort of we these words of affirmation that aren't really backed up by tangible action. But I think what you're saying and what really kind of is evidence in your work feels like being rigorous about your practice, right? So you talking about your working every day. Your time as an educator, I think, probably informs a lot of how you move through the world because there's compassion to the way you think about food and think about engaging people. But then being prepared for these opportunities when they come. And so being able to sort of draw back on folks you met, advice you got, the ways in which you want to making those decisions about the way you want to move in the world, it all gets informed by the fact that you picking up these tools along the way, and it all is kind of making you uniquely prepared for that thing. So New York, talk about. I mean, you've been here for a minute. I feel like the work you've done has sort of traversed a lot of spaces. You were director of Cucinary for a while. I mean, you kind of made that space what it is. Right now, I think one of the reasons we wanted to get this conversation happening this month was because it's National Hunger Awareness Month. Is that right?
Correct.
You don't work with the New York City Green Market, which is, I feel like there's a really particular ether to the all of the balls you have juggling right now. But I mean, talk a little bit about New York. It's a particular place. Is it's a particular place right now, but the work you're doing, I think, is so relevant right now, so critical.
Well, moving to New York had to be one of the best things that I ever did, one of the best decisions that I made for myself. I literally packed up and I went. And when I got here, I reached out to a couple of friends that I had to say, hey, I'm moving here. Do you know of anything? One of my friends had just got this email saying, hey, we're looking for a chef for a supportive housing unit in Brooklyn. Sent me the email. I sent off my resume, and they were like, hey, come in and cook. When I got there to cook, it was like a legit brand new 60 apartment building that they were opening in Flatbush for individuals that were coming out of the housing units and coming out of homeless shelters. And they all had like different mental disabilities. So part of the package was that I was on site there Monday through Friday or whatever days, and I was like the health educator and chef on site. So I would cook for them 5 days a week. I would take them on trips. I would teach them how to eat healthy. And I was there for 3 years. And I found that 3 years is usually my time to kind of feel something out.
Yeah.
While I was there for the 3 years, I was able to really build some amazing relationships with the tenants that lived there. Because initially we had issues with like the self-esteem and them not feeling that they were good enough to go on the trips that we're going. Because we were going to like Rachel Ray's show, we were going to the farmer's market and using the health bucks, but they didn't, out of 60 tenants, only like 2 would show up because they didn't feel like it was for them. So a part of it was like trying to break the stigma and saying, hey, you guys made it. Like you guys made it out and you guys are now able to start a new life. So being a part of that, Therese, was so cool to be a part of someone's brand new beginning while I was just starting mine, trying to figure it out. So while I was there, we had like a cooking club and they would come and help me cook the meals for the tenants. We did all these different events. But while I was there, I realized that a part of culinary philanthropy is going to have to be dealing with the tough things. And that's when I realized, my like tenants started to literally die. And the people that I was cooking for and working with and teaching how to eat healthy were literally dying while I was there working with them. So that was something that I didn't really take into consideration until I got to New York. So while being there for 3 years, I was really pouring into there, but not taking care of myself as much as I could, but not even realizing it until it was almost too late. Because I'm like, I'm tired of this now. I want to change. Like, I wish everyone was on the same accord. I wish things were different rather than just seeing things for how they are, So then I was there for 3 years. It was so great. And ended up leaving to go to like a summer camp job because I figured, hey, let's try that out. Because in this way, we can really feed kids for the summer. We can really be responsible for feeding kids during the summer and really get them what they need. And I would also get a break and get a change of scenery. And I remember I packed up everything, packed up my apartment, packed up my cat at the time, and we went to camp. And when we got to camp, we realized that it wasn't anything that they said it was. And honestly, it was a moment of reckoning because I'm like, am I running from situations or am I creating the situations for myself to learn something? Or is this really what giving back looks like? And the only one that could really make sense is the one that I'm responsible for. It's like, am I really putting myself in these situations? And I end up leaving camp and coming back and figuring out what's going on, what is going to be my next move. And then in that whole transition is when I did some self-development when I met your friend. And basically, hey sis, and basically what happened was there's this whole premise that basically when we're younger, something happens. And whatever happens, we give it this meaning. And as we go through life, as things happen, we give the things that same meaning over and over and over to keep us in the same place. And what happens is the universe conspires to give us lessons to teach us, but we can't see it because we're so clouded in our way. So basically, me and this whole 3-year thing and going into places and doing things was overwhelming. Because Therese, I even made it to North Dakota at one point on an oil rig, working for 6 weeks to say, hey, let's try it out to see how it is. And I got there, and after 2 weeks, I was like, holy smokes, this ain't for me. It's 10 o'clock at night, the sun's still out, and then when the sun goes down, it's negative 10 degrees. And it's like, but I'm like, hey, if I didn't go, I wouldn't have known. So it's like, my mother's always like, yo, David, like, you try some crazy ass shit. Like, you really go for things. And it's like, I feel like I've had the village and the community that supports me to be able to say, hey, David, go try it out. Go try it. Go see how Canada is. Go see how North Dakota is. And then when you get back, we're going to regroup and figure out what the next step is going to be. Because when it comes to like these food and wine festivals and stuff like that, the very, 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 very first one I did was like in Boca for this festival. And I remember my whole family came out. It was like 10 of us. And we made this pineapple jerk chicken stir fry. And it was like we had a whole system going, and people thought we was doing this for years. And it was only just a matter of me seeing it and realizing, hey, I think I know how I could do it, and then us doing it. So it's like, when I say the village, I mean like having a village that would get their hands dirty and that I can go home to say, yo, I had to quit that job. I don't know where I'm going to stay. I don't know what I'm going to do. Can I come back? Until...
Well, that feels revolutionary to me. I think, I don't know, if I know for myself, sometimes I feel like we limit ourselves so often when we don't see the possibility of being able to show up fully, right? Like your whole self, honestly showing up in spaces. Like you have the right to be whole and right to sort of try and right to be wrong and right to fail, to figure it out. And just, there's something so powerful about naming that and saying the words, right? Because even like to your point about like the point you made that I found like I'm so struck by is this notion of like working in a way that is about pouring into or giving back to or centering other people, but not sort of returning that kind of grace to yourself. And having to have to go through that, right? Having to have a moment where you seeing the trauma is maybe a too strong word, but the sort of neglecting that and the sort of check yourself, but you don't have the opportunity to check yourself if you don't go through the posture of not taking care of yourself. And so it just feels like such a particular part of the way you engage your like other people in your work. It's kind of like you don't really know where to draw the lines until you cross them.
Oh, I think that's so interesting because I feel like I've always had to cross the line before I really understood it, up until I really got the concept of what I was saying before. Like, things happen and we create the same meaning, and it's like once we're able to realize what it is and what we're making it mean, like, well, I'm not good enough, or I shouldn't be doing this, or this is not for me, or I should let other people do it, or is this okay? And it's like, yo, just do your thing, like however that looks. And it's like for instance, going to the James Beard house. Like, it's so interesting. The first time I actually went, I was volunteering, helping like a chef that was doing the dinner. And the first time it was like the chef was so excited and they're like, yo, this is dope. Help me do this, help me do that, help me do this. And I remember the second time I went, the chef was like, yo, this is dope. Don't touch anything. Like, let me do me. Like, I don't want you to mess anything up for me. And then it's like, going as a participant, as a judge for that blended burger thing, it's like the dynamics are completely different, but at the same time, you know how I am. Like, I'm gonna show up the same way so what's up, guys? How's everyone doing? Like, and like hang out and be me in the same space. So where my friends like, David, how was it when you were there? Like, how was your experience? So where it's like, I'm realizing if I can't be comfortable in a space and I can't do me and be me in a space, that space ain't for me. You see? So if I can't be in a specific place and when my song come on, I can't dance and jerk a little bit, then this is not a space for me. And it's like, so basically at Incochina, that was that space. Like that was the creation of that space for the community, for me to be, to teach, for others to come in. There were times where we had classes and the neighbors would like, the next day were like, yo, y'all must have really had a good time because y'all were screaming at the top of your lungs. It's like we would have people dancing and twerking on the sofa, on the window, like the music bumping and food cooking. And it's like, this is what food is about, bringing people together. So it's like when it comes to like culinary philanthropy and what that is and what that looks like, it literally looks like you getting an extra pack of chicken and cooking and packing it up and giving it to your neighbor. Or maybe having them come over and have some conversation and dinner. It's like it's really more simple than people make it seem, but it's like there's a disconnect between what giving back looks like on social media versus what it is in real life. All right, so for instance, at Incochina, before we left for the pandemic, had these three gentlemen, and they lived downstairs on the street of Incochina. And prior to the pandemic, before I left to go to Atlanta, I was like, yo, I'm about to leave. I just wanted y'all to know what was going on. It's a pandemic, da da da. They were well aware. And turns out one of them was working. You know, two of them were working, and one of them couldn't. But it's like, yo, every time I think about like homelessness, I think about what people think about like joblessness too. But it's like, yo, what I decided to do when I got back from Atlanta, I'm like, yo, we're doing these online cooking classes. Every time I cook, I'm making 3 plates. And my boys got plates every day. There was everything that was on my social media, they were getting. They're like, ooh, what's this? What's that? And it's like, it's as simple as giving the food that you have to someone. And it's like, it doesn't always have to be on social media for people to see you handing somebody something, or for you to like post and tag about, hey, I went and did this, I went and did that. Granted, it is Hunger Action Month, and the best way to like get people to give back and be a part of the community is to show what you're doing. But there's a way to do it when you're dealing with individuals, because sometimes it's a pride issue. Because I talk to my boys down there all the time, and I'm like, yo, like, bro, why won't you sign up for this, or why won't you sign up for that? He's like, yo, David, my family doesn't even know I'm homeless. Like, my family lives upstate, and they don't even know that I live here on the street. So it's like things like that, to where it's like, if I didn't talk to my boy, I wouldn't know. So it's like, now that we're closed, it's a whole different ball game because I'm no longer there, but they still are. They're still there. But it's been interesting to me to see the progress of homelessness, from having a job and living and being on the street, all in a pandemic, and having to bounce back and still work at the same time.
Yeah. Well, because that's I'm really glad that you sort of went there and took to that framework, because it really kind of, I mean, you have a particular yes, Donna, authenticity does not require an audience. Absolutely right. But you use very particular language about philanthropy, right? And I think that is necessary because it's a particular word, right? It means that it's a practice, right? It's a part of the way in which you engage. But I think that there's something really powerful about sort of deputizing especially people in food. We do this work and talk about food and live about food and cook and have this whole life wrapped up in food. Should we not be beholden to doing better by and addressing issues of food security, and do it in a way that is not about the shiny parts or being attached to an organization, but sort of being of service in whatever sphere you occupy, right? Whatever that looks like for you, whatever that looks like but it just having to be a part of your values, right? Like your ethos. I think it's so dope that you consistently kind of remind us that it doesn't take more than just being decent and sort of really being about this food life and being about what it really should be about. We're talking about feeding people. It's not just about the fancy part. It's about making sure that people in your space aren't hungry. I would love if you could talk a little bit about your work, your advocacy work, because there's working with the green market now. There's some things you're doing that are really targeted and that people can sort of help to support.
Right now, I'm working really closely in partnership with Grow NYC, which is the network of farmers markets here in New York City. There's actually 50 of them. It's so interesting. That time when I came to see you speak at MoFad, remember when you were at MoFad and it was the Edna Lewis talk? After you were done speaking, I went to like the cocktail hour and I was at the table with this lady and I was talking about what I wanted to do at the farmer's market. And she's like, oh, well, I'm the director of the farmer's market. Let's talk more about it. And I'm like, wow, look at the universe conspiring. And we sat at the table and we ate our cornbread and our collard greens and tore up that chicken. And last September, we actually launched Me Being in the Market. No, actually not even September, like April, Me Being in the Market. And I was there every Monday and Friday, demoing a dish and distributing it to the people that came by. And it's like,
side note, y'all need to make sure you following David because his Instagram is lit and he is constantly going live from markets or doing classes. So once we finish this, make sure you go and follow. But yeah, it's like the content alone that you sort of showing us about the market is dope. But sorry, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. So what's really interesting is like, we were doing these demos at the market, so we were able to really get the guests that walked through to taste the dishes. So it's interesting because initially everyone was like standoffish, I don't know what's going on, but then the longer I was there, the more comfortable I got. So but we would like dance and hang out, and the more like events that were happening to where they would like come along. So they came along to like the Black food folks and the queer soup night. They would come to Cucina, we would do takeovers to the point where for me, it just felt right to have like a partnership. So I love Grow NYC because it's really the backyard for New York City to grocery shop in. And I feel like it's the future of grocery shopping, especially with the pandemic and the fact that it's open air. And that everyone wins because it's like a community thing. Like the farmer upstate wins, the mom and pop wins, you win. Like you can like trust your farm if you go there a lot. So we started last month with cooking classes and we kind of saw how that went. And this month for Hunger Action Month, we decided to offer them for free because really what I've learned is that it's more so about communication and awareness and availability. And for people to really know that it's there. A lot of people don't know that the markets are there. A lot of people don't know that there's health books that for every $5 you spend, you get an extra $2 to spend on fruits and vegetables. So basically that's an extra 40% on your buying power because here in New York, all the students got PEBT, which is about $420 for each student to get groceries. So when you go to the farmer's market, you can get tons of that, tons of like extra stuff. What people don't know about the market is that there's also like proteins, beef, chicken, eggs, like everything except the paper goods and all the cleaning stuff. Like you can get everything you really need there and it's accessible. Union Square Green Market is where I am most often and it's actually the busiest one and it's actually the biggest one for SNAP. And it's in the most affluent neighborhood, but it's the busiest one for SNAP. And when I'm at the market, I'm typically hanging out at the information booth where they do the SNAP switch off. And I find that there's no particular look as to what these individuals look like they get SNAP. It's like they're of all colors, of all shapes, of all sizes, of all ethnicities, of all ages, and it's like everyone's coming out to take advantage of the perk. And it's like, yo, it's a really high-end experience that you're getting. And you may pay a little more, but it's definitely worth it because it's going back into the community. So I'm always proud to talk about Grow NYC because they're doing some dope work and the advocacy that they're doing in order to end hunger.
Yes. We're doing pretty good on time. And I want to make sure if you all have any questions for David, he is, as you can see, an extraordinary person who has lots of different types of experiences in his work. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the question situation. We also are following all of the dope comments in the thread, people going off, amen, and give you lots of hearts because you're so brilliant. I'm wondering if we could maybe talk a little bit about, I am always impacted when you get an opportunity to speak because, your presence, your physical presence, but the spirit is always like right on your sleeve. And there's, how come, So someone's talking about volunteering. I feel like that's one of those things people don't really think about either, right? Like all these great causes, all these dope things happening, and you feel disempowered sometimes when you don't really know how just jump in. If you're not like David, just go like make your way in. What's the best way people can support, like, with volunteering?
So as far as volunteering and supporting, it's as simple as like advocating online, sharing a post, putting something in your story, sharing the hunger hotline number, following Hunger Free America. This month they've been sharing a lot of like resources, so just literally
Going
sharing.
over
And
to Instagram,
then
yeah.
yeah, and then out of that side of that, like the tangibles would be like finding out your local food bank, your local food pantry, figuring out when they need people to help distribute bags and pack bags, going to grownyc.org and checking out their volunteer lists. There's tons of markets to volunteer at. I think someone said something about Grand Army Plaza on Saturdays. I'm actually going to be there this Saturday because I'm going to go check out Cicely and MJ, which are right outside of Grand Army Plaza. So I'll be there for a while. But there's so many ways to help and volunteer. But I think the best ways are saying, hey, come over, let's cook. Call your friends over, say, hey, come over, let's talk, let's cook, and have a meaningful conversation about the climate of the world right now. It's like back before this all happened, we did City Suppers. And City Suppers was really about talking about what matters most to you. And in different times of our lives, it's a different thing. And right now, I feel like a lot of times, well, right now, it's self-care. It's like figuring out how to maintain in this ever-changing climate where there's like there seems to be no leadership, from the top. So it's like, for me, I'm trying to just take it day by day,
Yeah. So yeah, we'll watch for more questions to come, but I guess I wanted to sort of make sure we went to this idea about how you show up in the world. I'm so fascinated. Like, I feel like I don't know if if you follow like my work, or even just the context and sort of the framework of Black food folks, I think we often, let's see, let's see, hold on a second. You find that feeds you more intention. Oh, that's a good question. Do you see Donna's question?
What was that?
It says, do you find that in feeding others, it feeds you more internally than even the folks you feed it? Like, do you get more out of the experience than they do?
I love that question. Because I find that I do. Because especially in a time like this where there's like so much uncertainty and I'm trying to figure out how to feel good for myself internally, it's great for that to manifest externally. So like with the closing of In Cucina, it's like the closing of the chapter. So it's like the 1st of September, we cleaned out that fridge and we got Jasmine from the Bio Fridge to come over and cook with me. And we sent out like 100 meals over 2 days to these fridges to where it's like, what was going to happen with that food? And then it leads me to believe, what is happening to all the food in all these restaurants that are closing over and over and over in this pandemic? And it's like, for me, it was like cathartic to be able to cook that food, package it up, make it nice, send out some banana pudding, some lasagna, like some comfort food. And then in doing that, that gave people an opportunity to help. Because people in the community were like, hey, I want to help. How can I? Jasmine was like, hey, can you come and pick up the meals and distribute them? And then when they got to the kitchen, they were like, yo, we're so excited to pick up the meals. And it's like, people want to do stuff, but it just sometimes seems very hard to do it when it's literally like, yo, pick up an extra bag of potatoes, pick up an extra bag of oranges, and knock on your neighbor's door and be like, well, mama, I got some potatoes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was in my complex the other day. It was the weirdest thing. There was this big box refrigerator truck. And they were like, yo, milk, 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 milk. And I'm like, what? They're like, yo, we're giving out milk. And particularly, I don't drink milk. But I'm like, yo, I know my neighbor does. So I took 2. I'm like, yo, here you go. Like, figure out what to do with the milk. And it's like that kind of forward thinking is what makes me feel better. Because I'm like, yo, it all kind of works out in the end. Like the things that I've seen the universe kind of conspire for me to to happen in my life is like, yo, just be. And it's like, it took for me to be an adult to realize that, yo, there's nothing wrong. Like, it's like we're not taught that we are whole, perfect, and complete as we are. And it's like, once I was able to hear that, once I heard that, like my whole entire life changed, because that made me realize, yo, being whole, perfect, and complete, I can do anything and everything if I put my mind to it. Like lacking nothing.
That's Be Riches. Y'all need to Be Riches. I don't know. I've told you this story. So this is a documentary. Be Riches was this film actress. She was, if you ever see her, like she did this poem called "A Black Woman Speaks," and she was in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, just like Daughters of Dust, Beloved. So this is documentary. She was towards the end of her life, and she emphysema, like on oxygen, and even in this like diminished capacity, she was still the most beautiful, the most dynamic. And she was talking about, because I mean, her presence on stage was just mind blowing. But she said those words. She said, when she was on stage, she was complete, lacking no essential part. And it's 5 minutes into this documentary, but she says those words with gasping breath so surely. And I'm like, you're damn right. Like, that's exactly how we should all be able to feel when we show up in spaces. But then also there's something about what you said, like there's this power in decentering yourself, right? Like decentering your own worries, decentering like especially in the midst of pandemic. Somebody just asked a question about if sort of being of service in pandemic is kind of a salve. And I think that it absolutely is, right? Like this ability to be so uncertain and so fragile and tender feeling and dealing with all kinds of trauma, but having an outlet to be helpful and to be of service to somebody else, it sort of removes the pressure and the kind of perpetual nature of trauma and depression. It gives you something tangible to sort of tie on to, I think.
100%. Like for me, like especially during the pandemic, it's like I'm in this purge, like realize like I have all these clothes that were out of sight, so I never wear them. And I'm like, all right, let's downsize. So like, let's put them all in the bag and let's give them out to the boys by the kitchen. And it's like, they're like, yo, like I can wear this to find a job. Like I can wear this to get an interview. And it's like, yo, it's the little things. So it's like they've been down there for that time, and they've been always saying, yo, how, like, we want to help you, we want to help you, we want to help you. And there was never a way for them to help me until last week when them boxes were heavy as hell. And I said, yo, can y'all help us take the boxes down? And they're like, yeah, but can you watch our stuff? So I remember my homegirl watched her stuff, and they're like, yo, one of them, like Kevin was like, yo, I'm a mover. So I'm like, oh, well, shoot, let me back up. And the way they packed that car with all that fragile stuff, they finally had an opportunity to help me. And it's like, yo, I didn't know how to give them an opportunity, but that was finally it. And that's all they wanted. And it's like, yo, there's like, I guess in my personal life, it's hard to believe that there's good people out there. But yo, in my career, it was hard too, until I realized I have to be him. And I have to be him all the time. I have to be him all the time, especially out here in New York. Like I said hi to this little mama the other day, and she was like, thank you for saying hi. And I was like, well, shit, what's up? Like, if that's the case, because I'm like, yo, it takes nothing to say hi. But sometimes these homeless people feel invisible. And it's like they're not invisible and they're not otherworldly. It's like they just got on bad luck, on bad times.
That any of us could easily be in that position, right? Like, it's something so powerful about that. Don't you feel, I mean, because I just feel like the way what I hear you saying and what this kind of boils down to is sort of how you model the world, like how you model the world you want to be a part of. And even in spite of, I don't know, my mother used to say this all the time. She's like, you sort of have to protect yourself, right? You have to be protective and sort of precious about your resources, about like physical resources, spiritual resources. Surely you should not be out in the world reckless and just letting people take advantage of you. Right. However, when you sort of operate from a posture of expecting the world to be horrible, expecting people to horribly buy you, it steals something from you. So you can't control what other people do. You can control how you give to the world, how you put energy out into the world. And so then what comes back to you, hopefully, is more good than bad. And that's kind of the best we can hope for, I think.
Really and truly, because it's like, regardless, it's like none of us get out of this thing unscathed. All of us are going through things at the same time. And it's like, I think that's my biggest gripe with social media. It's like social media is like this whole fantasy world where it's like, even in the pandemic, we're all literally grieving the life that once was back in March. And everyone's acting like everything is okay, not really supporting, not really doing what they say they were doing, to where when we had this Black Lives Matters uprise, now on the back end here in September, we realize how performative it was, because we still haven't had any tangible, real change yet, but yet the dust has settled, you know, to where it's like, you know, what was going on with Cozy Mill and how that went down, to where it's like, Black lives have always mattered, but it's like, if we don't push for it, we're not, when will we see it? And it's like, we have to see it amongst ourselves. And it's like, everyone's out here has it in them to do and to be who they are and to be great. And it's like, if we're dealing with entities that are suppressing us and holding us down financially when they're winning, especially in a pandemic, something's got to give.
Yep.
So I'm big on transparency and clarity. And anyone that's ever like came to Katrina knows that if something's about to happen, they're going to know what it is, how it's going to go, how they can help, and how they can be of service and be of community. Because one thing I do know is it literally took a village for me to be able to do the things that I've done in my life. And it took for me to put all the bullshit of who people want me to be, who they think I am, and who they want me to be, for them to realize, hey, I need to make sure that I'm okay. And what does that look like?
Yes.
And for me, that looks like taking advantage of every single moment as it happens. And a lot of times you don't even know what that even looks like, but you step out and you go. And it's like, when I first came to New York, things like magical things just started to happen, because I was like, I'm not going to stay home. I'm just going to get out and go. And then I remember I was teeter-tottering on going to the soup event when I first moved here. And I'm like, yo, should I go? Should I not go? And I decided to go. I went to the soup event, started drinking my soup. I turned to the side and I saw Tyra Banks and her mom. And I said, well, clearly we had to talk. And I'll never forget, I went up to her and I was like, yo, what's up, auntie? How you doing? Talked to her mom. And we talked about how we both couldn't stand okra when it was boiled, but somebody had made okra and it was crispy, so we were tearing it up.
Yeah.
And she was like, yo, what are you doing here? And I'm like, yo, I moved here to do my culinary philanthropy, my Caribbean soul fusion. She was like, yo, that's dope. And I was like, yo, can we get a picture? She was like, yeah, but I have to do it after because everyone is going to want one after. And I'm like, yeah, I feel you. And yo, right before she leaves, she turned around and she winked at me and she was like, yo, come over here. She was putting her jacket on and she gave some face and we took our picture. And I was like, wow, so this is what New York is like. You know, I was like, wow, so this is what New York is like. So if I keep my eyes peeled and if I keep on speaking up for myself and not missing an opportunity, I can really create some magic here. And I saw it unfold right before my eyes, to where in Katrina happened and we were booming. Like classes 5-6 days a week, double booked, like private dinners, like everything. And then COVID hit and it's like, whoa, you know? So it's like the pivot has been real for everyone, I think, since the pandemic. But we all noticed the pivots on social media are very performative. And even in this pandemic, when people are doing things for the community that need to be spread and for the word to go out, it's not getting shared. Yeah. So it's like, it's a really weird time where right now, during this Hunger Action Month, this is the worst shape that America's ever been in as far as hunger is concerned, as far as a lot of things, financial, jobs. And we're right back to regular programming on social media. People aren't using their voice to help and support. And it's that simple. To like repost, to like, to like send a comment, to share.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not happening. And I don't know what it takes to make that happen, but I feel like it's a really an inside job.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, you were uniquely built for this moment. You have been modeling the notion of making change and sort of being able to navigate change on sort of a drop of a dime. So I'm nothing but hopeful and sort of encouraged by what you have coming up next. I want you to spend the last couple minutes, because if you have any questions, I think we sort of answer them as they kind of come along. I would love it if you could spend the last couple of minutes. Kind of, I mean, you don't know who's watching. We don't know who's going to rewatch this thing, and what you put out into the universe is absolutely. You seem to be able to manifest what you want out in the world by verbalizing. So, what does the future look like for you? Like, I mean, you in this moment of transformation, this moment of really kind of the world being open to you, and you have all of these tools in your arsenal. What does your work? What would your work look like now if there were no barriers?
My next phase that I'm really been thinking about going into is being able to lift up others and to support others in doing the community work in culinary. For instance, I would like to do more production, like behind the scenes production of like culinary television, maybe like social media content, a lot of philanthropic things that need a culinary component. I find that I'm tired of being on the line. I'm tired of the schlep and the groceries and all the prep. And while I was doing all those classes, I got so many DMs about people wanting to do classes and wanting to learn how to do them. So I would really like to pivot next to work with an organization that is equitable, first and foremost, that is looking to uplift chefs, not only chefs in America, but all over the world, that want to figure out a way to give back to the community as well as pour into themselves so they can maintain. Because we know how much mental illness runs in the culinary world, and we don't talk about it. Just like how all these other issues are going on, we don't talk about them. So it's like, my next pivot is to work with an organization that is really about the well-being of not only their consumers, but their clients and their staff.
Yeah, man. You seem uniquely prepared to do that work. Yeah, I can completely see you being, anybody out here who is looking to be a more effective, not just sort of, Instagram cooking classes, but who are looking for, sort of best practices as it relates to like teaching and instruction. You need to reach out to David, maybe, get a little consultancy situation going on, because you have a way of drawing classes in and making them so dynamic and dope. And those are skills I think that are teachable, and people should be paying you their monies to learn those skills. But I don't know, we speaking this into the universe. You're gonna find that home or create that home that does this work. I have no hesitation about believing it to be true. We did so good on time. I feel like this is a perfect little bow on the end of it. Please tell the people where they can find you.
So you guys can find me at Chef David Stample here on Instagram, as well as on Facebook. You can send me an email. You can send me a DM if you guys have any questions. We're offering classes every Thursday for the rest of this month at 6 o'clock. They're free this month so that everyone's accessible and has access to them. We'll be making wheatberry salad this Thursday, but I'm most excited about our pajama pancake party the last Thursday of the month, where we're making some really melt in your mouth pancakes and a fruit compote. So if y'all have any questions about any of those things, let me know. But Therese, you're my favorite, and you know it. And every time we get to talk, I learn so much more about myself just in our dialogue. And you're a queen, and I can't wait to see you in real life.
Yes. I appreciate you. I love you, and we will get that social distancing situation up and running soon. But yes, please, Green Market, you're going to be Grand Plaza this
Yeah, I'll be
Saturday?
at Grand Army to wait, what's the day? Today is what?
Friday.
Yes, I'll be at Grand Army
Mm-hmm.
Plaza tomorrow. I guess I'll be there
Okay.
from 12 to 2.
Okay.
12 to 2
Awesome.
tomorrow, and then I'm going to go check out Cicely and MJ and go
Yes.
tear up everything on the menu. I don't
Yes.
know where I'm going to start, but the meatloaf burger sounds good. The pancakes and chicken sound good. The black eyed peas salad sounds good. So I'm just going to get
Yes.
it all and just tear it up.
Yes, sir. All right. See you soon.
See you soon, Ma.
All right. That was so good. Okay, y'all. David is just brilliant. Please follow him here on Instagram. He goes live all the time, different places. He's clearly, you all see how infectious and lovely he is. We get a little bit of a break, and I'll be back at 3 with the very brilliant Kayla. She's a really interesting, Kayla Stewart. Is a really beautiful writer, recent graduate of NYU journalism school. We're going to be talking all things food writing and sort of food media. So be back at 3. Talk to y'all later.